Chicago's autumn nights were wonderful. The neon lights of the signs mingled with the fog, and shadows danced in the streets. The wind whistled through the rusty fire escapes, making the city feel eerie. I'm Jake Harper, 26 years old, a delivery guy on an old motorcycle, living a life confined to the chaos of the streets and the cold asphalt. My leather jacket couldn't block the freezing October wind, but the new order on my phone warmed my heart. Rosewood Apartment, 1313 Wabash Avenue, Apartment 7, Emily Carter. My heart raced when I saw that name. Because 2 weeks earlier, when I delivered pizza to Emily, the way her red hair fell over her shoulders, her green eyes sparkling like broken glass, and her smile drawing me in were still vivid in my mind. She had read my name from the slip and said, "Jake." The softness in her voice when she said my name made me feel like we had known each other for years. For a moment, I forgot the cold and the world stopped. Now, I was going back to her, my hands trembling with excitement, but I turned the throttle a little more to go faster. When I arrived in front of the Rosewood apartment, I stopped the motorcycle and looked around. The building had a different atmosphere. It rose like a ghost among the modern skyscrapers. The silence of the street seemed to have swallowed the city's usual buzz. I took off my helmet and fixed my hair because I wanted to look handsome in front of Emily. As I took the pizza box out of my bag, its warmth warmed my hands as I walked toward the door. The apartment door was left open with a brick. When I stepped inside, the smell of mold and rotten wood stung my nose. A dim light bulb flickered. The wallpaper was old and peeling. The doorbell panel was covered in scratches. The spot for apartment number 7 was empty. There was only a rusty metal housing. I noticed the oddity but didn't think much of it, figuring maybe Emily hadn't written her name. There was a yellowed piece of paper on the elevator door. It read, "Out of order." It was covered in spider webs. Sighing, I headed toward the stairs. The wooden steps creaked with each step, echoing in the darkness, as if the building was protesting my presence. When I reached the 7th floor, I was out of breath. My heart was racing, not just from exhaustion, but also from the excitement of seeing Emily again. The hallway was like a tunnel of shadows, lit only by a flickering fluorescent light. The damp stains on the walls were not very inviting. I reached the door of apartment 7. I paused for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and listened. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently. A sliver of light was shining through. "Emily, the pizza's here," I called out, but my voice was swallowed by the silence, and there was no response. I stepped inside. The apartment looked like an abandoned tomb. The streetlight shone through the dirty windows, illuminating a collapsed sofa, a cracked coffee table, and a rug with frayed threads. This was not the warm and tidy apartment I remembered from last time. "Emily?" I called again. My heart racing, I heard a creak behind me. The door slammed shut. My heart pounding in my chest, I spun around, but the hallway was empty. Only shadows danced on the walls. I grabbed the doorknob and tried to turn it, but it was locked. It was as if someone wanted to trap me inside. "What's going on?" I muttered. My voice trembling, I pulled my phone out of my pocket, but the screen was black. I had charged it just an hour ago. In a panic, the pizza box slipped from my hands. The lid flew open and slices of cheese scattered across the carpet. At that moment, a whisper rose from the depths of the apartment. It was like the sound of dry leaves being carried by the wind, unintelligible but unsettling. It felt like someone or something was mocking me. I clung to the wall and made my way down the hallway. The wall was cold and damp. I felt crumbling paint under my fingers. As the whispers grew louder, a shadow darted across the wall. It was long and crooked. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, but when I turned around, there was no one there. As I tried to understand what was happening, I began to feel increasingly afraid. At the end of the corridor was a room with the door ajar. A faint blue light was shining from inside. It looked like a television had been left on. Swallowing hard, I pushed the door open and saw an old tube television standing in the middle of a dusty rug. The screen showed a fuzzy image, but there was no sound. The image suddenly became clear. It showed me entering the street, parking my motorcycle, and taking off my helmet. The camera seemed to have been following my every move, but then I noticed something. I was so shocked that my knees went weak. I wasn't alone in the footage. A dark silhouette was following me from behind. Its face was invisible, just a blur. My knees trembling, I whispered, "What is this?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Suddenly, the television went black, and the whispers ceased. But I felt a movement at the back of my neck, a cold breath brushing against me. I turned around and saw that the door was open. I ran outside, but I wasn't in the hallway. I was standing at the entrance of the apartment building next to my motorcycle. I was out of breath and sweating. My jacket was stuck to my back. When I checked my bag, I realized the box was gone. My phone was on, but the order had been canceled. The screen displayed the following message: "Delivery complete. Thank you, Jake." When I reached up to scratch my neck, I felt a dampness on my hand. There was a thin cut where the silhouette had stood, and the blood was on my hand. "This can't be real," I muttered, but the wound whispered the truth. I jumped on my motorcycle and sped away from that street as fast as I could, but Emily's green eyes were still shining in my mind. I thought I was in love with her, but that apartment, that street, seemed to be waiting to swallow me whole. The next night, I was on another delivery near Wabash, but my mind was still in Rosewood. I asked my boss Mike about the apartment. Mike was a man in his 40s who smelled of cigarettes and had a keen eye for detail. When I mentioned the Rosewood order, his cigarette fell to the ground, but he quickly picked it up. "Weird place, the system gets messed up there," he said. I sensed he knew something as he looked away, but I didn't press it. A moment later, my phone vibrated. "Rosewood again, apartment 7. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, but thinking of Emily, my fingers automatically accepted the order, because her smile overshadowed every fear. When I arrived at Rosewood, the street was quiet, the lamps flickering. The apartment greeted me with the same musty smell. As I climbed the stairs, a flood of thoughts came to mind. I reached the apartment door. It was ajar again. I pulled out my flashlight and shone it into the hallway. The apartment was dusty and cold. The sofa was sagging. The coffee table was cracked. There was a photograph on the table. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a photograph from my childhood. I was 10 years old, and it was taken with my mother in Grant Park. This photograph had been lost in the house, and my mother had cried looking for it. "How did this get here?" I whispered. As my voice echoed down the hallway, the flashlight flickered, and a shadow moved across the wall. "Don't go back," a voice said. I turned around excitedly, and Emily was standing in the hallway. I took a step back, startled. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with fear. Her red hair glowed like blood in the dim light. "Go, Jake," she said, trembling. I took a step forward, but she disappeared. It was as if she had never been there. The flashlight in my hand suddenly fell to the floor and broke. For a moment, everything was dark. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out and looked at it curiously. It was a message. "Come back." The number was unfamiliar. My mind was spinning. Was Emily real? Why was that photo here? I went back home and looked in the mirror. The cut on my neck was deeper and bleeding. The photo was in my pocket, but my hands were shaking. Rosewood was invading my dreams. The corridors stretched on, whispers rose. I was thinking about Emily. I asked Mike again. Rosewood was destroyed, he said, but when I said, "I'm taking orders," he shrugged. "System error, forget it," he said, but his eyes were lying. That night, I researched online. In the 1980s, there had been a major fire at the Rosewood apartment building, and dozens of people had died. Official records said the building had been demolished, but I had been inside that building. In a news article about the fire, the name of a child who had survived was mentioned, Jake Harper. For a moment, my blood ran cold. I didn't remember the fire, but my mother used to tell me fire stories when I was a child, saying, "You were lucky." I remembered the fear in her eyes, but I had never asked for details. My mother had died 2 years ago, and now those stories haunted me like a shadow. The next delivery was again to Rosewood. This time I was determined. I wanted to know the truth. I entered the apartment, my flashlight trembling. Emily wasn't there. On the table lay a dusty diary. I flipped through the pages. The words described my life. My childhood, my mother, the delivery job, even Emily was there. But the writing looked like a woman's handwriting. It was delicate and elegant. Was it Emily's? On the last page of the diary, it said, "Jake, you never left here." I picked up the pen and tried to copy the writing. My handwriting was the same as the one in the diary. At that moment, the whispers returned, and the TV turned on by itself. The scene of me entering this room was playing on the screen. But this time, Emily was standing behind me. There was a twisted smile on her lips. I ran toward the door to escape, but there was no door. The walls seemed to be closing in on me, as if they wanted to swallow me whole. The whispers repeated, "Finish the delivery." I screamed, but my voice didn't even reach my own ears. When I returned home, the wound on my neck was bleeding, and there were red stains on my jacket. I had brought the diary with me, but the pages were blank. Only the last sentence remained. "Jake, you never left here." Another message arrived on my phone. It read, "Tomorrow, again." I deleted the message, but I couldn't sleep. Rosewood was calling me, and I was tired of resisting. A memory flashed through my mind. As a child, I had heard the scream of a red-haired girl amid the flames. My mother had pulled me out by the arm, but I couldn't forget that girl. Could Emily be that girl? I returned to Rosewood one last time to find the truth. This time, I decided to go down to the basement. As I descended the stairs, they were dark and slippery. In the basement behind a rusty door, I found a motor. It was old and looked like it had been burned in a fire, but it looked like my motor. There was a plate with my name engraved on it, but the date was 1980. That was the year I was born. Whispers rose. Shadows danced on the walls. Each one bore my silhouette. "This is impossible," I murmured. As I wandered, I found Emily in a room. Her red hair glowed like blood in the dim light. "Why are you calling me?" I shouted. She turned slowly. Her face was pale, but she was smiling. "You never left here, Jake," she said. The TV turned on, and the screen showed me running in the fire as a child. My mother was screaming, "Run, Jake!" but I was frozen. The flames were filled with the screams of a girl with red hair. My eyes widened, and I stammered, "You? Emily?" She had a knife in her hand and was approaching me. "You called me," she said. Shadows surrounded me. "You are us," they said. I fell to my knees, covering my face with my hands. Whispers repeated, "Finish the delivery." Emily raised the knife. "You called me," she said. "No!" I screamed. The knife in her hand came down, and everything went dark. I felt myself being dragged through the darkness. Corridors stretched out, doors closed, whispers rose. My life played out on the television like a movie. My childhood, the fire, the courier job, Emily. But every scene felt like a lie. Emily was in my mind, but she was also real. Shadows approached me. "You are us," they said, their voices like a chorus. I fell to my knees, covered my face with my hands, and the whispers repeated, "Finish the delivery." Emily appeared. She had a knife in her hand. "You called me," she said. I couldn't look at her. The fire in my mind returned. Flames, screams, and a red-haired girl. "I couldn't save you," I whispered. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Emily smiled. "You're trying to save me, and you're here," she said. The knife came closer to my chest. I screamed, but my voice was lost in the darkness. Everything stopped, and suddenly I was on Wabash Street standing next to my motorcycle. I was panting, my helmet in my hand, and the streetlights were on. Everything was back to normal. There was a pizza box in my bag. I opened it and looked inside. There was a note. "I'm already here." It was written in my handwriting, and my heart nearly stopped. I went home, ran to the bathroom, and looked in the mirror. There was a bloody mark on my neck, and red stains had stained my jacket. A message came to my phone. It read, "You'll come back, Jake." I deleted the message, and my reflection in the mirror smiled. I delivered it to myself, it said. It was my own voice, but it was cold. I froze as I looked at my reflection. At that moment, a curtain opened in my mind, revealing a dark truth. Rosewood Apartment was a reality in my mind. I was in a mental hospital, tied to a bed. The white walls, fluorescent lights, and whispers of doctors were real. Emily was my childhood love. She had died in the fire at Rosewood in 1980. I was 10 years old, and I couldn't save her from the flames. My mother pulled me out by my arm, but Emily had disappeared in the flames. My mind couldn't cope with the guilt, so it created this world. The courier job, the streets of Chicago, Rosewood, Emily. Every delivery was an attempt to save her, but I failed every time. The whispers were the doctor's voices. The childhood photo was a memory from a hospital file. The diary was the notes I had written but forgotten. The motor in the basement was the symbol of my escape fantasy. As I looked at my reflection, she smiled and said, "You'll come back." And I bowed my head, tears falling to the ground. In the hospital room, tied to the bed, my eyes open but seeing nothing. The doctors said, "Jake, stay calm." But I was riding my motorcycle on Wabash Avenue. On an endless street, I was returning to Rosewood. The note was still in my hand. "I'm already here." I was the author of my own story, but the story had imprisoned me. My name is Ethan Cole. I work as a courier. Every night I'm in the Atlanta area. It's 11:47 p.m. The last order from the company comes in on my phone 5 minutes before the end of my shift. Reluctantly and tired, I look at the screen. Address 1423 Maple Street Apartment, 4B, Unit 19. As I stare at the screen in disbelief, my heart starts racing. This is my home address. Is this a joke? Is the company playing a prank? I check the order details on my phone. There's no customer name, just a note. Rush delivery, urgent. A sense of unease begins to grow inside me. I'm very tired, but I'm not in a position to argue. I put the food order in my bag and stepped on the gas. I headed home. As I drove quickly, the streetlights danced on my helmet visor. This part of Atlanta is quiet. Here, you can hear the sound of tires on the asphalt and the wind more clearly. 1,000 thoughts are racing through my mind. Is the delivery address wrong? Would the company make such a mistake? But the address is clear. It's my apartment building, my apartment. I grip the handlebars tighter and keep going without letting up on the gas. When I arrive at the apartment building, I chain my motorcycle to the rusty metal post in the parking lot. The street is empty and quiet. Only the distant howl of a dog echoes long and spine-chilling. My hands are trembling as I open the building's front door, filled with excitement. As I climb the stairs, the sound of my boots echoes through the concrete corridor with each step. It felt like I was walking in a cave. I reach the door to my apartment. I take the food out of my bag, take a deep breath, and knock on the door. I wait curiously to see who will open the door, but there is no response. I knock again, this time harder, only silence, nothing else. But a thin strip of light seeping out from under the door catches my attention. It feels like someone is inside. I took my keys out of my pocket, but hesitated as my hand reached for the door. This is my home, isn't it? Why am I knocking on the door? But the uneasiness inside me was coiling like a snake, squeezing my stomach. I put the key in the lock and turned it. The door opened slowly, the hinges creaking softly. I step inside and the world stops for a moment. I walk toward the living room. My bag is on my shoulder, the food package in my hand. This is my home, but something is wrong. The furniture, the cabinets, the rugs are familiar, but everything seems wrong. The fabric on the couch is worn, the edges are torn, and the foam is sticking out. There is a painting on the wall. It's a landscape painting my mother gave me years ago, but the painting has faded, the frame is broken, and the glass is cracked. But the strangest thing is the television. In place of my LED TV is an old tube TV. It's a model I remember from my childhood. My breathing quickens and my throat tightens with excitement. I start to think that someone is playing a prank on me. It's as if someone has broken into my house and changed everything. I ask myself why, and how could it have been done in such a short time? I start walking toward the hallway. The creaking of the floorboards is now even more frightening. With every step, the panic and fear inside me grow. But my curiosity was also growing. I headed toward the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, and light was seeping into the hallway from inside. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. As I looked around, my reflection in the mirror caught my attention. I turned my head toward the mirror and froze. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. I saw myself in the mirror, but I was different. It was my younger self. My face was smooth, and there were no dark circles under my eyes. My hair was thicker, and my shoulders were straighter. I was looking at myself from 10 years ago. I wanted to touch my face, but the image in the mirror didn't move. It was looking at me with a slight smile, as if it knew a secret. "What's going on?" I whispered to myself. The reflection in the mirror didn't respond, but its eyes seemed to be telling me something. A warning, perhaps, or an invitation. I quickly left the bathroom. In my stress and excitement, I threw my bag on the floor. The paper bag tore open and the burger and fries spilled out. The smell spread, but there was something strange about it. It was very sharp and sour. It smelled like food that had been left out for days. It looked rotten and moldy. A nauseating smell spread throughout the room. Strange things continued to happen, and I was becoming increasingly confused. I decided to go to my bedroom. What would I find there? I peeked inside the room and looked around. The air in the room was very heavy. Everything was covered in dust. It looked as if no one had entered the room for years. My bed looked old. The sheets were worn and torn at the edges. There was a photo on the nightstand. It was my photo, but this time there was someone else next to me. A woman. Her face looked familiar, but I couldn't remember her. Excitement and adrenaline were overwhelming me. It was as if I was about to remember something I had forgotten, but my mind was hitting a wall. I reached out to look closer at the photo. As I tried to touch and hold it, the photo suddenly melted and turned to dust. I was in shock at what I saw. I struggled to keep from screaming. The silence was broken by a ticking sound coming from inside the house. It was a soft, rhythmic sound. I thought it was coming from the kitchen and started walking toward it. My steps were slow and cautious. When I reached the kitchen door, I stopped. The door was closed. Looking through the foggy glass, it seemed as if a shadow was moving inside. Curiosity and fear mixed together. I reached for the doorknob, but a voice inside me said, "Don't open the door, go back," but I couldn't. My curiosity was stronger than my fear. As I opened the door, the hinges creaked. There was a dim light in the kitchen. The old fluorescent light on the ceiling was flickering. Someone was sitting at the table. When I saw him, I jumped. He had his back to me. He was slightly hunched over and his hair was white. I realized it was me. I had aged. There were deep lines on my cheeks. My hands were shaking. On the table was a plate with the same food package I had brought. The man slowly turned his head toward me. With every passing second, my heartbeat grew faster. Our eyes met. His face was mine, but it looked tired and exhausted. "Leave the delivery," he said to me. His voice was hoarse and muffled. It was my own voice, but it sounded different. "We do this every night. Complete the delivery, keep the cycle going," he said. The words echoed in my mind, ringing in my ears. "What cycle?" I asked. My voice trembled. My throat tightened. The man smiled, but it was a different kind of smile. He looked at me as if he felt sorry for me. He said, "Didn't you notice? Always the same night. Always the same delivery. You, me, and him. We're all the same." I approach the table, but with every step the kitchen changes. The walls fade, the tiles crack, the air grows heavy. It's as if time is speeding up or I'm disappearing into it. "I can stop this," I say, but my voice is weak, unconvincing. The man slowly shakes his head, as if he's heard this 1,000 times before. The words come out of his lips. "I tried." "You tried. We always try. But the package always comes back." I look at the package on the table. It's the same paper bag I brought, but the edges are worn as if it's been there for years. I reach out my hand, but as soon as I touch it, the bag turns to dust, floating in the air like a fragment of a dream. The man's eyes lock onto mine. "Complete the delivery," he says again, in a whisper, "or you won't be able to leave here." I step back toward the kitchen door. I look for the door, but it's not there. The walls are closing in on me and I can't breathe. The man gets up from the table and walks toward me slowly. His steps are heavy but determined. In a softer, pleading voice, he says, "Come on, hand it over. Hand it over to yourself." In a panic, I look around for an exit. Everything is blurry. It feels like the world is melting. The ceiling is lowering. The walls are rippling. My head isn't in the right place. Out of nerves and fear, I scream, "Why? Why this cycle?" The man looks at me and says, "Because you chose it. That night, when you took that order, you chose it." The words are etched into my brain, but I don't understand. What choice? When? My mind is spinning. Memories are blurring. It's like everything is a dream, but it's very real. I open my eyes and I'm on the motorcycle. I'm on a dark, quiet street. The silence is broken by the sound of a notification on my phone. It's an order notification. Address 1423. Maple Street Apartment 4B. Unit 19. My hands are shaking and I feel a rush of excitement. I check my bag. The food package is there. It's even warm and fresh. But the smell is disgusting. The stale odor is still in my nose as if it's seeped into my skin. I rev the engine and take off, but this time there's a different feeling inside me. It's as if I've experienced this moment before. The street lamps, the dog howling, the iron door of the apartment. Everything is the same. Everything is familiar. I struggle to carry my feet up the stairs. They feel very heavy. It's as if I'm walking in a dream. This time, I enter without knocking. A young man is standing in the middle of the living room. It's me. Me from 10 years ago. He has a food package in his hand. He looks at me with a confused expression. "Who are you?" he asks in a trembling voice. I know there's no need to answer, so I just stay silent. Without taking my eyes off him, I place the package on the table. I turn to him and say, "Complete the delivery." Morning arrives. The sun is breaking through Atlanta's gray sky, but I feel no warmth. I start my motorcycle and head out for a new delivery. But there's an emptiness, a void inside me. I don't remember when it began. I don't know when it will end. All I know is this. Every night I make a delivery to myself, and the cycle continues. A light rain was falling on the wide streets of Los Angeles. The city's street lamps reflected off the asphalt, glowing like pale ghosts on the dark streets. The palm trees swayed in the gentle breeze, and raindrops fell from their leaves, sometimes landing on a car, sometimes on an umbrella. Jack was riding his motorcycle, wearing a black helmet and a black leather jacket with white stripes that glowed in the night. Jack was a motorcycle courier. Through the visor of his helmet, the refractions of the outside lights created colorful mosaics on the fogged-up glass. He was making his way through the streets in the cold rain. The sound of the engine echoed through the quiet streets of Los Angeles. Jack roamed the night like a shadow. Like every other courier, he sometimes got lost in the city's streets, rushing to deliver orders. A notification popped up on his phone, which was resting on the handlebars of his motorcycle. It said, "Delivered." Jack was confused. He pulled the motorcycle over to the right and looked at his phone again. The order had been delivered, but Jack hadn't reached the address he was supposed to go to. He looked back through the rearview mirror. He scanned the area around him. There was a dark street and a few parked cars. Everything seemed to be in order, but there was an uneasy feeling inside him. He started his motorcycle again and continued on his way. He had arrived at the location shown on his phone. He was in front of an old apartment building. This was one of the quieter, older neighborhoods of the city. The exterior of the apartment building was faded, and the windows were blurred with rain. The dripping rain created a tinkling sound on the windows. He got off his motorcycle, took the bag in his hand, and walked toward the apartment door. He was about to ring the bell when he noticed the door was open. As he climbed the stairs, drops of water from his jacket were soaking the floor. Each step echoed in the stairwell. He reached the apartment door, and it slowly opened. Standing before him was an older man, stern and weary. His eyes were both surprised and questioning. "You were here just a moment ago, weren't you?" he said. Jack was startled. His words caught in his throat. "No, I just arrived," he said. The man shook his head slightly. "Your jacket, your helmet, everything is the same. You left my door 2 minutes ago." Jack was still stunned. He paused, unable to speak as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Jack extended the bag he was holding. The man took it and slammed the door in his face. He went downstairs and stood there in the rain, numb. He brought his hands to the straps of his helmet. They were trembling. He couldn't tell if the trembling was from the cold or from the mystery that had seeped into him. He took off his helmet and breathed in the fresh air. He got back on his motorcycle and rode away. While driving, he saw a park and stopped. He walked toward the park and sat down on a bench under a tree. The park lights reflected off the rain droplets onto the puddles on the ground. It was quiet around him. He heard a rustling sound. He turned his head toward the sound and saw a silhouette in the corner. It was wearing a black jacket and a helmet. It looked like him. The silhouette standing in front of him was motionless. Jack thought it was a reflection, but then it moved. Jack stood up and took a step forward. The figure in front of him also took a step toward him at the same time. His heart began to race. He wanted to take off his helmet. His hands were shaking and he could hardly breathe. The silhouette in front of him slowly took off his helmet. Jack jumped in surprise, because the face that emerged from under the helmet was his own. It was pale, lifeless, and staring at him with a meaningless smile. Jack collapsed and fell to his knees in excitement. As the rain hit Jack's forehead, the lips of the figure in front of him began to move. His voice was hoarse and cold. "Did you think you could escape me?" The rain had stopped and the clouds had dispersed. Jack had fallen asleep on the bench, motionless as a stone. He slowly opened his eyes and a light breeze cooled his face. His eyes were fixed on the spot where the silhouette had stood, but there was no one there. Jack felt a chill run through his body. It wasn't just the cool air, it was a sensation of touch, an indescribable energy coming from the void. His breathing quickened. He pressed his hands against his knees and slowly stood up. He noticed his legs were trembling. "What's happening to me?" he thought to himself. He walked over to his motorcycle. The gaze that felt like it was stuck to his back seemed to penetrate his skin. He started the engine and, despite the urge to look back, drove off without turning around. The streets were deserted. It was late at night, but this silence was unusual. This was a city that was usually alive at night. There would be music coming from somewhere, laughter from a corner. But now everything was silent. Only the sound of his motorcycle echoed between the buildings. Jack searched every corner, every bench, looking for something. He was looking for the same silhouette. He wanted to see her again, but he also wanted to reject her. He stopped in front of a station. The market lights were on. He wanted to drink some coffee and clear his mind. He parked his motorcycle and took off his helmet. The warm air caressed his face. He entered the market. He took a cold coffee from the shelf and approached the cash register. The cashier woman glanced at him briefly. She didn't smile. There was no familiar expression on her face. "Are you back again?" she asked. Jack paused. Feeling uneasy, he said in a timid voice, "This is my first time here." The woman glanced at him indifferently and said, "Okay." Jack took his coffee and went outside. As he took a sip of coffee, he saw something reflected in the window. The same silhouette was standing behind him. He was wearing a helmet and wasn't moving. Jack froze with a sip of coffee in his mouth. He quickly turned around, but no one was there. There was only a trash can. Maybe the reflection wasn't real, but it felt very real. Jack tried to calm himself down from the tension he was feeling, mixed with fear. He got on his motorcycle and started driving home. He climbed the stairs slowly, exhausted, and entered his home. He unlocked the door and went inside. He took off his shoes, walked into the living room, and collapsed onto the couch. He took his phone out of his pocket and checked his notifications. The last delivery was listed twice in the records. At the same time, to the same address, 2 deliveries. How could this be? One of them had been made before he made his delivery. It was unclear who had made it. His name was in the system, but the delivery time was earlier. He threw his phone on the table. He leaned back and turned his head toward the window. The city seemed to have drowned its noise in water, lifting the veil of silence. The fog on the window, the damp night, and the hazy street lamps still shining on the asphalt. His eyes were on the window, but his mind was much deeper inside, in a much darker place. Fatigue was so overwhelming that it was forcing his eyelids shut, but his spirit was not responding to his body's demands. He shivered slightly from the coolness of the window he was leaning against. He couldn't remember how many times he had looked at the clock or gone to the kitchen to drink water during the night. All sense of time had disappeared from his mind. Only one thing was clear, an undefined, boundless uneasiness growing inside him. As he sat there, he noticed the peculiar atmosphere in the room for the first time. The air had changed. There was an invisible heaviness in the air. It was as if the walls had moved a few inches inward. The ceiling had lowered slightly, and the furniture, though still in its place, seemed filled with a different energy. His eyes drifted to the TV stand. The remote control was where he had left it, but there were different fingerprints on the dusty surface of the stand. One seemed to have been placed right next to where he had touched it. A slow rising possibility began to form in his mind, at first like a small itch on the edge of his consciousness. Was someone here? He tried not to answer that question in his mind. Staying silent, not thinking about it, not pursuing it was best. But sometimes even the quietest thoughts began to scream in the darkness. He slowly got to his feet. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet, breaking the strange silence in the house. He went to the kitchen to get a drink of water. He opened the cupboard doors to get a glass. The white cup that always stood in the corner of the left shelf was not in the same place this time. What's more, the handle was turned inward. Jack always arranged the cups so that the handles faced outward. It was a small, insignificant detail, but Jack had certain habits in his world. He reached out and took the cup, but felt a slight dampness. It was almost imperceptible. If he was right, it meant that the cup had been taken from its place and used recently. He flinched and took a step back. His breathing quickened. He said to himself, "Am I scaring myself, or is something really happening?" He didn't ask the question out loud, but his mind had already begun to collapse under the weight of the answer. He returned to the living room. This time, his eyes went to the bookcase. The arrangement of the books always calmed him. He arranged the books with care. He separated them by color and arranged them accordingly. Everything was in order. But one book was out of place, a thin, black-covered novel. He had carefully put it back in its place the last time he read it, but now the book was not sitting properly, part of it sticking out. He pulled the book out with his fingers. When he opened it, he noticed something else. There was a bookmark in the middle of the book. But Jack had already finished this book. Jack's eyes widened. Something inside him was moving toward the unknown. He put the book down. He glanced around. He walked toward the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. When he pushed it lightly, the tired creak of the hinges echoed in the night. He wanted to turn on the light, press the switch, but the light didn't come on. At that moment, it was as if someone inside him whispered, "This can't be a coincidence." He turned on the light on his phone and looked around the room. One of the pillows on the bed had shifted too far to the side. The other pillow was upside down. The notebook on the nightstand was open. As he skimmed through the pages, he saw sentences written in his handwriting, but his eyes fell on the last line. Jack didn't remember writing that. It read, If this is me, then who is the other? His eyes widened, his heart raced, and his breathing became irregular. There was a mark on the edge of the page. It looked like a dried stain. Was it coffee? Blood? He couldn't be sure. A sound came from inside. Jack jumped involuntarily. He went toward the bathroom. He approached the door cautiously. Just before stepping inside, he wanted to turn on the light, but the bathroom light wasn't on either. But the floor was wet. It looked like someone had just gotten out. The shower curtain was trembling slightly. Was it the wind coming through the window? Jack reached out his fingers toward the curtain. Just as he was about to pull it back, he heard a voice behind him. "If you didn't do this, then who did, Jack?" It was his own voice. He closed his eyes. His breath caught in his throat. His heart felt like it was about to burst out of his chest and run away from the bathroom. He turned around, but there was no one there. And in that moment he realized something was living with him, something that was imitating him.